Hello, today I'll be doing a discography review. This time it'll be for the band Linkin Park. So yeah, before I dive into this, I do want to mention that the band does have a Discord, and if you want to find that Discord link, you'll find it at the band's YouTube channel. Just go to their community tab and you'll find it there. But yeah, let's go ahead and dive into this. I do have some things I do want to show. I do have a few pins right here. I got these from the band's website. I also have these stickers that I got from this Linkin Park lot thing that I got from eBay, where it came with a couple CDs and all of these stickers right here, which is pretty cool. I mean, I'm not someone that collects stickers, but they came with the lot that I was getting from eBay, and I figured, hey, why not? But yeah, we got a lot of stickers here, but yeah. Pretty cool, but let's go ahead and dive into this review. Of course, before Hybrid Theory, they did put out the Hybrid Theory EP, and this is not the original, this is the remaster, but the remaster is also not that easy to find either. But yeah, there's some pretty cool stuff on here, like Carousel, Step Up, which leans more towards the more hip-hop side. I really like that one. You have And One, which is maybe one of my favorite Linkin Park songs. You also have High Voltage on here. You have a short song called Technique, and it closes off with Part of Me, which I like that song. Never been one of my favorites on the EP, but I do like it though. But yeah, still pretty cool to have in the collection. I also have this CD right here, which is a sampler CD. But yeah, moving on to their iconic debut album, Hybrid Theory. And yeah, this thing is definitely a classic. I mean, when it comes to the world of nu metal, it's definitely one of the best. It definitely ranks up there as one of the best things to come from that movement, from that genre. I mean, you really can't go wrong with any of the songs on here. This is a no-skip album for me, and same with the next album, but we'll get to that album later. But yeah, the hits on here, the big songs on here are still great all these years later. Paper Cut, One Step Closer, which was on Rock Band 2. Points of Authority, which is a contender for maybe being my favorite song on the album, easily one of my favorite songs from the band in general. Crawling is great. In the End, wow, probably one of their most played songs by far. You can maybe make the argument that it's maybe overplayed, but even with saying that, I still dig that song all this time later. But you do get some pretty good deep cuts on here. I mean, some of the less talked about songs in here are also really good. A Place for My Head, With You. That song is stuck between two of the bigger songs on here, One Step Closer and Points of Authority, of course. You do have Cure for the Itch, where you get to really hear the talent, Mr. Han. Forgotten's also pretty good too. By Myself, I really dig the heaviness that you get in that song. But yeah, all around, again, definitely a classic, definitely a really great album, and also, of course, one of their best. But also, I do have the 20th anniversary box set for Hybrid Theory, and if you have the box set too, let me know in the comment section below. But with that box set, you get these CDs here, such as this one. You got Reanimation. But yeah, these are card sleeves. You got LPU Rarities, B-side Rarities, and finally, Forgotten Demos. So yeah, pretty cool stuff. Also, before I dive into Reanimation, we do have this CD right here. I think it was only released in Japan, but I could be wrong about that. I'm just going based on things that I've heard, but either way, pretty cool to own. But yeah, moving on to Reanimation, and I'll admit I'm not someone that's really heavily into remix albums. There's really only 2 or 3 that I'm really into. But this is one of the few remix albums that I think is really good. Executioner Style, even though a shorter song on here, it's actually one of my favorites. I do like the remix of Pushing Me Away also, same with Points of Authority. But yeah, definitely a really good remix album. And of course, if you somehow haven't heard it, definitely check it out. But now we'll be moving into Meteora. I also have these Street Team Sampler CDs, which are pretty cool to own, especially if you're a collector for Linkin Park, whether it be CDs, vinyl, or anything like that. But yeah, we'll be moving to, in my opinion, their peak and their best album, and that is Meteora. So I've mentioned before in some of my previous videos that this is one of my favorite albums of all time, and this also might have been the first album I ever heard in full from front to back, which is pretty cool to think about. But yeah, this was the album that hooked me into the band. From the Inside, I think, was the song that pushed me to check out this album. But yeah, just like with Hybrid Theory, this album has no skips. It's another album that ranks up there as one of the best things to come from nu metal, in my opinion. Such an amazing album. Can't go wrong with anything on here. I mean, of course, like with Hybrid Theory, the singles on here are still great all these years later, in my opinion. Somewhere I Belong, Faint, Breaking the Habit, definitely a unique song from them. It also has a pretty cool music video. From the Inside is awesome. I always have a soft spot for that song, especially. Same with the album closer, also one of their biggest songs. That song, of course, being Numb. You also have some pretty good songs on here that I think are somewhat kind of overlooked. One of them being Nobody's Listening, which sounds fairly different from the rest of the album. I think this album has some good variety to it, but yeah, Nobody's Listening. If I remember correctly, you get a Japanese flute in that song. Definitely, again, a unique song on here, and I absolutely love it. Figure Point Zero Nine has to be one of their most underrated songs. I mean, absolutely love that one. Definitely deserves as much recognition as some of their bigger songs, in my opinion. Same with Lying From You, excellent song. Easier to Run is a song that, for me, might have some of Chester Bennington's best vocal performances ever. I mean, that song, his vocals in that song are just excellent. I mean, you can really feel the emotion and just really shows how great of a voice that he has. That song, again, really displays that very well. Don't Stay is also really good. I mean, again, definitely, honestly, kind of a perfect album for me. And again, definitely my favorite album from the band. Let's go ahead and move on to Collision Course, where they collaborated with Jay-Z. Now, I'll go ahead and admit it, I don't listen to Jay-Z's music. With that said, I don't have a problem with his music, but again, I've never really dug deep into his stuff. But I did like what he did here with Linkin Park. If I were to name favorites, Dirt Off Your Shoulder, Lying From You, Numb Encore, of course, which is the big one on here. But the album closer has to be maybe my favorite on here, potentially maybe. That being Points of Authority, 99 Problems / One Step Closer. Absolutely love that one. Again, maybe my favorite on here, but yeah, definitely a really cool listen for sure. Now I'll be moving to an album that is somewhat kind of divisive, especially at the time of release, and that album is, of course, Minutes to Midnight. So for me, when I became a fan like, I want to say a year or two after this album came out. So yeah, I mean, I was actually really into it from the first listen. I mean, in the back of my mind, I knew that this was fairly different from the previous two albums, but still was saying that I still was really into it when I first heard it. And I still enjoy this album all these years later, and I think it's maybe one of their best also. I mean, Wake, pretty good intro, but this album also has some of my favorite songs from the band. I mean, Given Up, which is maybe one of their heaviest songs, especially you have that iconic scream towards the second half of the song, and it's just epic. It's just awesome. A good reminder of how awesome and how great Chester Bennington's voice is and what he can do vocally. Leave Out All the Rest is also really good. Got some pretty solid anthems on here, like What I've Done, of course, and Bleed It Out. No More Sorrow has to be one of my favorite Linkin Park songs. It's always been one of my favorites on the album ever since the first time I heard the album, and yeah, it's excellent. Hands Held High is kind of an overlooked song, definitely one of their more melodic songs, but I personally really dig it. Again, kind of underrated. In Pieces is also pretty good, another underrated song on here. But there are two songs on here on the album that I've always never really liked all that much, In Between and The Little Things That Give You Away. But with Little Things Give You Away, that song has actually grown on me a little bit. I think it's okay, but it's always been one of my least favorites on here personally, but not bad though. In Between is also, well, that song might be my least favorite on the album, to be honest. I've never cared too much for that song, but it's okay-ish. I don't think it's bad, but again, always been my least favorite on here. Valentine's Day, kind of an underrated song. Then you move to the song Shadow of the Day, which is a song that's never really stuck with me all that much compared to other songs on the album. With that said, I don't mind the song. I like it, but I've never loved it though, but either way, all around, I still think this album is one of the band's best. It definitely has a share of songs that I think are somewhat kind of underrated, like, again, Valentine's Day and, honestly, No More Sorrow. But also, you have this album right here, Songs from the Underground. Definitely worth checking out if you want to hear some of the band's deep cuts, especially QWERTY and One. Dedicated's pretty good, which is a demo. But now we'll be moving to the album that definitely polarized people. It's definitely me, especially. I remember when this album came out, I was very disappointed, or kind of conflicted about it in general, and that is 1,000 Suns. But over the years, I've actually grown to like this album much, much more. With that said, there are a few songs on here that don't do a whole lot for me. Robot Boy being a song that really never really done a whole lot for me. I find it to be honestly kind of boring. But if you like that song, more power to you. Nothing wrong with that. But yeah, this album is a concept album that deals with nuclear war, if I remember correctly. And overall, it's an interesting listen. Definitely a unique album in their discography, and definitely cool of them to do something different. With that said, of course, it's not going to be for everybody. But again, for me, as years have gone on, I've grown to like this album more and more. But let's go ahead and dive into the track listing. Some of my favorites on here, When They Come For Me, kind of a unique song. I really like that one, especially the drumming. Waiting for the End, which is one of the fan favorites on here. I really like that song. I can't remember how I felt about it when the album first dropped, but if I had to guess, I probably like this song much more now compared to when I first heard it, when the album first dropped. But Blackout has actually been one of my favorites ever since the album came out. I really like that one. Wretches and Kings, another highlight for me off of the album. I really like the vocals in that song, especially from Mike. The Catalyst is another favorite of mine on the album. That's always been one of my favorites ever since the album dropped. Definitely, of the singles, probably my favorite. I mean, even now, it might be one of my favorite Linkin Park songs. Potentially, maybe. I don't know. I really dig that song much more now. But yeah, all around, pretty good album, I'd say. It does have a few skips on here. I mean, they're not all songs land for me, but still, overall, not a bad album. And definitely, again, an interesting listen. But now we'll be moving to the album Living Things. I remember when this album came out, I remember seeing, I'm not saying a lot of people, it could have been a lot of people, I don't know, but I remember at the time there were some people calling this album a return to form. Even at that time, I disagreed with that very much. I mean, it does sound closer to their older work compared to 1,000 Suns, but even with saying that, this is by no means a return to form. But with that said, there's some pretty good stuff on here. But at the same time, this is one of those albums for me where you have a strong first half, but definitely a weaker second half. But with that said, there is some decent stuff in the second half, though. Powerless being a standout for me. I do like Until It Breaks, too. Victimize, while a shorter song, I do like that one. But yeah, Lost in the Echo, the album opener, probably my favorite on here. Burn It Down's also great, especially Chester's vocals. Lies Grid Misery, while a shorter song, another favorite of mine on the album, and also somewhat kind of underrated, I'd say. And you also have Castle of Glasses, which is another single off the album, which I also do like. Not my favorite on here, but still one of the stronger songs on the album, I'd say. So yeah, with this album, I wouldn't rank it as one of the band's best, but with that said, overall, still a solid album. And then we have this remix album called Recharge, which I don't know if this is controversial to say, but this remix album I don't think is all that great. A Light That Never Comes, I don't mind it. It's okay. It's not a song that I reach for very much, but with that said, I still don't mind it, though. I think it's, again, decent. But yeah, this remix album has never done a whole lot for me. I definitely think Reanimation blows this thing out of the water, but that's just my personal opinion. But then we'll be moving to an album that I absolutely loved when it first came out, and that is The Hunting Party. And at the time, definitely the thing that came the closest to sounding like early Linkin Park. With that said, still wouldn't call it return to form, but still, again, definitely comes the closest to sounding like their older work. But yeah, some of my favorites on here, the first three songs, Keys to the Kingdom, All for Nothing, which features Paige Hamilton from the band Helmet. If you've never heard of Helmet, if you're not familiar with them, please check out Helmet. Definitely a great band. Their 90s work especially is also pretty good. Guilty All the Same, which features Rakim. I do like Rakim's verse in that one. Guilty All the Same, if I remember correctly, was the first single, and yeah, definitely a great song. You have the song War, one of the heavier ones on here, also pretty good. Until It's Gone has always been one of my favorites off of here. Some solid melody in that one. You also have Rebellion featuring Darren Malakian from System of a Down, another band that I really love. Toxicity is one of my favorite albums of all time. Mark the Graves, one of their most underrated songs in my opinion. Then we get to a song that, ever since I first heard it, I've always found it to be a very disappointing song, and that is Drawbar featuring Tom Morello. I love Rage Against the Machine. Tom Morello, definitely one of the best guitar players out there. Definitely in my top 10, but man, he didn't feel used all that well here. He felt kind of underused. You can barely even hear him all that much in that song. I just didn't think it was a good use of Tom Morello with that song, but that's just my personal opinion. Final Masquerade's good. Never been one of my favorites on the album, but I do like it though. But yeah, all around, pretty good Linkin Park album, I'd say. This album and Minutes to Midnight fight for being my third favorite Linkin Park album. Honestly, pretty good, and definitely had a share of some pretty underrated stuff on here that if you haven't heard some of these songs on the album for a while, definitely go back and listen to them or give them another listen, especially All for Nothing and Mark the Graves. But yeah, now I'll be moving to their latest album, One More Light. Man, was I disappointed when this album came out. I mean, I'm not a big pop guy. I mean, I wouldn't call it the worst genre or anything like that. Still, with that said, I'm not a pop guy. But when the album came out, again, really disappointed. It really wasn't for me, but it does have a couple songs I do like, though. Talking to Myself probably being my favorite song on here. Maybe the closest thing on this album to sounding somewhat like rock, you could say. But you also have the title track One More Light, which is the other song on the album that I do like. But especially with where we're at now, it is kind of sad to listen to that song now, knowing what happened to Chester. So that is a kind of part of the reason why I don't listen to that song as much as I used to. But still, the title track, pretty good song. I remember when Heavy came out, I was definitely one of those fans that did talk smack. Probably it wasn't as overbearing as some of the other fans maybe, but Heavy, I remember just being like, oh man, oh no, Linkin Park, why, and all that type of stuff. But listening to Heavy now, I would say that I actually don't mind it as much as when it first came out. I actually think it's one of the better songs on here, but with that said, it's not a song that I return to all that much. But yeah, again, the songs I do like, Talking to Myself and One More Life, that's really it for me with this album. The rest of the album is either take it or leave it for me, or I just straight up do not like it. Good Goodbye is another song that I don't mind, but not something that I seek out. I do like Pusha T's verse. Stormzy's verse I can do without. Not a big fan of that guy's voice, personally. And of course, I do like Mike's rapping in that song, but yeah. The album, it has a few moments that I do like, but overall, easily the band's worst. But yeah, that is my review of the Linkin Park discography. Let me know your thoughts on my review here. Do you agree or disagree with some of my thoughts here? Let me know your favorite or least favorite songs or albums from the band. Let me know what CDs or vinyl or physical copies of albums that you have. Let me know what merch you have, posters or anything like that, and all the good stuff. But anyways, thanks for watching. Please leave a comment and a like. Subscribe. Have a nice day and take care.